Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. I'm back again with Dr. Warter with his fascinating knowledge and skills in these healing conversations that we've been having. Welcome back, Dr. Carlos. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. When I'm with you, I'm well.
That is fantastic. Now, you have an amazing announcement to make today. What is coming up in your life that we can get excited about?
We are launching an institute that will be called the Warter Institute for Consciousness and Psychedelic Studies. And I will get into it as this conversation proceeds.
Fantastic. You never cease to surprise me with how you live your life. One of the fascinating things I have noted about you is as you are learning, you are teaching. They say that the best teachers learn first and teach next. And in the teaching, it reinforces all of the lessons that you have learned yourself, correct?
Absolutely.
So human consciousness and our awareness of it is a pursuit and a passion of yours.
Yes.
The psychedelic healings is something that I have had a small experience with. I would love to learn more about what this institute is going to be offering.
Okay. First, I have to start by saying that 51 years ago, I had the good fortune in Chile at a time before Richard Nixon took over the demonization of psychedelics to be trained and study at the university the healing power of these substances, which are not new. They're ancient, they are depicted in caves, they are embodied in rituals in Africa and in the jungles of South America. They are initiatory substances that from father to children, from tribal leaders to members of the community, have shown more and more throughout the ages what is our human promise. And that's my focus. Not just the healing and the treatment of conditions, but the promise. What are we meant to discover? If we look at caves, we see psilocybin mushrooms depicted 5 to 12,000 years ago in different parts of the world. So having had that opportunity then, and having entered later a long period of prohibition in which the powers that be, not interested in human beings finding out more about themselves, made it wrong, made it bad. And now we are entering a renaissance. Worldwide, there is more and more interest in decriminalizing these substances, number one, and in using them as treatment and, as I like to prefer, for the discovery of what human beings really are. You would be interested in knowing that in Gabon, in Africa, there is a tribe called the Biviti. The Biviti tribe has had weekly ceremonies with a plant that is known as ibogaine, iboga bark, which connects the decision-making of the tribe to the contact with the ancestors. And Howard Lotsof, a man that was addicted to cocaine 40 years ago, used it and healed himself from the addiction and helped many others under the name of a substance incorporated in Canada with the name of NWs. Of course, today it is still illegal unless you go to Gabon and experience the initiation. But I had the opportunity 40 years ago to be invited to the Academy of Sciences of the former Soviet Union and realized that there was an anesthetic by the name of ketamine that was beginning to be used in the metabolism of what we call the NMDA glutamate aspartame receptors, which produces a healing of depression in an instant, in a very short period of time. We are used to Prozac and SSRIs and SNRIs, which sometimes take months and months to take somebody out of a condition of depression, of suicide, of pain, of obsessive compulsive disorder. Remember, I'm trained in medicine and psychiatry, and I also hold a PhD in transpersonal psychology. So I want to speak today as a healer, as a doctor. The institute that I'm launching will begin specializing in this substance, which is legal, absolutely legal, and has demonstrated in a right context to produce a healing of depression at a speed never before imagined. And I call that the ketamine quest. The ketamine quest will be done in group format with the addition of this substance that can be done IV or IM. I prefer to use it IM, giving it much less risks because an anesthetic is an anesthetic. It has been used as an anesthetic for decades under Park Davis Laboratories and now another. And what I have found in patients is that their suicidal ideation disappears. Their chronic pain, emotional and physical, is gone. In 1 to 4 sessions, that individual recovers the love of life and gets out of the negative thinking that leads to a major depressive disorder or to a bipolar depression. We don't have medicines that act at that speed today. So after studying it and having used it for years with patients in places where there was no legislation about it, such as in South America, I have come to the conclusion that we need to offer that to the community and at a minimum possible cost in a group setting, allow a context that sometimes translates itself, for instance, in an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, an experience that allows the individual to value life because the observation of life from a context that is not pain is fabulous.
Wow. Now, describe to me the experience that one has when they are on this medication. I remember I was in Seattle when I first had my experience. I was working with a Native American Indian group, some medicine healers, and my brother had just died. Well, it was before my brother died, actually, now that I think about it. My brother died of AIDS, and he was very ill at the time. And I was trying to find some kind of medication that could help him. So I bought some of this medication and I shipped it to Africa. It never got to him in time, unfortunately, but they gave me this, I would say it was tobacco. It smelled like snuff. My grandmother used to use snuff. And they told me to smell it, and it smelled very familiar. I wasn't scared. It felt like home is the only way I can describe it. And they put it in a small straw and put the straw into my nostril. And I was asked to breathe it in. And when I went in, I had to ask for something. So at that time, I was looking for understanding what was going on in our family, the issues my young brother had. My brother was a drug addict and an alcoholic. And I had an out-of-body experience. I could feel my soul exiting from the back of my head the minute the tobacco went into my body. And I was on the ceiling and I was observing myself from that vantage point. This medicine man came with a Native American Indian blanket. He covered me with a blanket and he was chanting over me. And in that state, I realized that everything is energy. It was like I was in a soup of energy and I was a part of everything that was in that room. I was bouncing off the walls like a ping pong ball. Like I would hit that wall and come back and bounce off this wall. It was just the most exhilarating experience I've ever had. And I remember there was a glass of water on the table. And I decided to experience what it was to be water. And I dived through the glass into the water. I became the glass and the water at the same time. And I came out on the other side. Now, this experience to me felt like it had taken 10 minutes. And then the medicine man whistled and said, "Gertrude, it's time to come home." And in an instant, I felt my soul going back into my body. I looked outside. We had started this process at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was now 9 o'clock at night. And what felt like 10 minutes was actually 12 hours. And I learned so much from that experience. The first thing I learned was the illusion of things physical is just an illusion. It's a construct that we have put together so we can exist. The construct of time doesn't exist. It's a concept we human beings have decided that this is how we get to work at 9 o'clock and finish at 5. But time is an illusion. It actually does not exist. I also learned that everything is vibrating at different energies. So when I was in that state, I was in a completely different energetic form to my physical body right now. And when I went into the water, my energy transformed to the energy vibration of water. And they explained to me that the fact that I could touch the table was because of the sensors in my hands. The table didn't actually exist, but my hands decoded the table as being solid because it was vibrating at a different frequency. I still remember that experience to this day. Whenever I find myself feeling sad, feeling depressed, I am just reminded that I am a spiritual being having a physical experience, and none of this actually exists. And the emotions that come through us that cause the sadness, the happiness, the depression are just emotions that we allow to experience every once in a while, and they pass through us. So sometimes you have to sit with the sadness. Sometimes you have to sit with the grief for a while, and you can make that decision to stay in that state or to move on. So that was my experience with psychedelic substances. I am not sure what it was that I was given, but it totally, totally changed my life.
So wonderful to hear you. My heart is jumping of joy to hear that you have had an experience as such, because that's what I call the human promise, the realization that we are spiritual, or even that word doesn't mean much. We are beings, we are existence. And when I speak of the ketamine quest, which is the only legal substance now in the United States, to be able to help in a minimum amount of time to facilitate a similar experience to the one you have just described, an experience of non-locality, an experience of occupying different spaces according to the focus of that moment. As you said, the water, the glass, the table, the body. But really, what we are is a context. And I like to call this the contextualization of life instead of the contenttualization. We are so accustomed to fit in. I was thinking the other day that in those tribes in which teenagers are initiated with that substance or any other, and are given an opportunity to realize that they have a mission, they have a function. You know, people change their name when they're teenagers, and they change their name to a name that becomes the function, the service, the vocation, not what we have in our society, in which everybody tries to fit in order to get a job, in order to survive in a system which is decadent. Look how decadent it is that in a planet with the experience that you've had of abundance, there is scarcity, there is hunger, there is poverty, there is misery, and there is war. When we are meant to live the satisfaction of the spiritual thirst. And there are so many substances from thousands of years ago being given from generation to generation. And what I am very happy about is that finally, in the decriminalization process, we have a renaissance, a spiritual renaissance, a psychedelic. You know, the word psychedelic means the unfoldment of the psyche, the unfoldment of the soul. I prefer to use another word, though, entheogenic, generating of the divine, of the theos, an entheogenic experience that produces certainty that who you are and who I am are forever. We are not just as circumstances limited by the dash between birth and death. I'm sorry to hear about your brother, and I'm sorry to hear that he didn't get to experience it, because today there is research done with psilocybin, which is the magic mushrooms, in hospital settings, universities of the East Coast of the United States, in which the ingestion and the experience of one of those magical substances allows first for the disappearance of the fear of death. And even though this is given to terminal patients, or what we call terminal patients, people who are very severely sick physically, they approach the next step of their evolution with simplicity and no fear, with faith. Faith, dedication, and knowledge is required in our society. And if these products will bring about not only, as I was mentioning at the beginning, the curing or the healing of a depression, of an obsession, of pain, physical pain. So many people are affected by pain. And if one can be outside and be in the consciousness of the water, and they say that we are made of water, and flow with it, flow, water, then the approach to the next step is fearless. And what we need is a word of fearless people, not of afraid people that can be dominated, and they react with the only things that we're taught to react: false expectations about reality. There is such a spiritual hunger and spiritual thirst, much more than the physical one. There is thirst to know and to really find out that not only need we not to be suicidal, depressed, afraid, angry, and contracted, but we are meant to discover that we are, for lack of a better word, spiritual beings.
Now, do you think religion has played a big part in instilling the fears that most human beings have? You know, the fear of death. One of the other things I was taught through this experience was that in most indigenous cultures, death is the beginning and not the end. I remember they put me through a visualization process where I had to see my brother's funeral before he died. They said to me, Gertrude, your brother's going to die. In fact, we're all going to die. It's just a matter of when. And I visualized his funeral 6 months before he passed. I remember developing flu-like symptoms that made me crawl into a hole and grieve for almost a week. I cried until I emptied out all of the fear of his passing. I remember at my brother's funeral, I was calm. I was joyful that he wasn't in pain anymore. And I learned so much. I learned so much. And I know that religion has instilled a lot of fear in human beings. Fear of the unknown, fear of what happens when I die. And what we don't realize is there is only life and life and life and life. And we just transform into a different medium, a different form that is not physical.
I was actually saying this today to somebody that said, I'm afraid of the end, afraid of dying. I said, there is one thing you need not to be afraid, what they call death, because death doesn't exist. Transcendence exists. And I gave this example. Have you ever seen a baby, a newborn, that grabs the amniotic fluid and shovels it up their nose, or takes the placenta and walks out into the world with a placenta? And they laughed. They said, of course not. Well, that's how much we need the body in the next dimension. We become subtle. We don't need this body mind. We need essence. And the same way as that baby doesn't do anything with their placenta, we have nothing to do with this body when we cross over, as you had that experience. We can say induced experience, but you know something? It's a guarantee experience that we will all have at some moment. And if we're not prepared, yes, religious institutions, not religion in itself, because religion means religare, which means to reunite, which is the same as yoga, unite. But instead of uniting, the institutions have threatened people, to control them, to do certain things in order for them not to be free. And so many religious activities have created wars and killing and murder from every moment in history, from the Bible itself, when God says to Moses, go and kill them all, when the Crusades kill everybody in their way, and when the Muslims conquer the whole world through killing those that are infidels. What does that mean, infidels? Not having faith? Indeed, they don't have faith that there is a larger context that we need to discover. But I don't want to place myself against religion. I don't want to place myself against anything. I just want to give myself the opportunity to be able to help and to assist people who are in ignorance to come into bliss.
So if there was someone who is listening to us right now, who has a family member, a relative, somebody who's struggling with addiction, what experience will they have when they come to your institution and your clinic?
They will free themselves from the addiction. There are so many substances that have been proven. I give you an example of ibogaine before. And I remember many, many years ago when I had access to it, because then the Ebola virus took place in Africa, and my wife didn't allow me to go get the product in Gabon. So I've never been to Gabon, but there was a moment in which we could have it. And I remember this man, he was addicted to cocaine. He was unhappy. He was miserable. Cocaine was his way out. I had one opportunity of treating him, one treatment. For 12 years, he never looked at cocaine again. Why are these forbidden? Because there is a business in cocaine, because the narcs have controlled the governments. And we know that when the United States was fighting with the Nicaragua, the Contra people in Central America, it was in the New York Times that the financing of that war by the US government was selling cocaine. So this is too bad that we are allowing governments that have prostituted themselves for money and avoided healing their populations.
You know, I had a conversation today with a woman about the shootings in the United States and the gun control. Governments, a lot of times, have so much influence on the negative things that are happening around us. And what you're describing is a similar example to gun control in the United States. There is a business in having those guns circulating. Money is being made somewhere.
Money, billions are being made by the National Rifle Association, and they finance political campaigns. So it is a miracle that President Biden, after the last killing that took place, is trying to produce something to diminish the free consumption of weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction are the little guns, the teenager, which are unhappy, which don't know who they are, buy freely and go and shoot their equals. This has to stop, and we need to have it stop. We need to have it stop at the level of Russia, that one man wants to be immortal, and he already changed the history books because he separates Russia from the West. And in the meantime, victims have happened in the Chechenians, have happened in the Ukrainians, and are happening inside Russia. And of course, what I'm saying is politically risky because everybody's afraid. What is Putin going to do to me? Putin is not going to do anything to me. I am not important. So I can do my work.
Wow. Wow, this is an amazing breakthrough, that this is now something that is accessible to people, all over the world. Is it just accessible in the United States, or are there other countries where people can also get access?
Slowly, it is permeating other countries. It is interesting that there are many substances that are still forbidden. They're Scheduled 1, they're called. And Schedule 1 means they exist, but they don't have any medical use. Nonsense. They have fantastic medical use. Fortunately, ketamine is Schedule 3. That means any physician can prescribe it and use it. And this is a tremendous change, a tremendous change. There is a lot of research that went on between the 20s, the 30s, the 50s, and then it is known that when the Vietnam War was taking place, the ultimate dream of the US government was to be able to give LSD to soldiers that will become kamikazes, like the Japanese that will kill themselves for the fatherland. If you remember the song written by the Beatles, Make Love, Not War, in the 70s, was the big frustration for the US government. And therefore, even though the research was conducted by the CIA, they made it radically illegal. I had the precious opportunity of meeting and celebrating Albert Hoffman's 100th birthday. He was a chemist in Sandoz who was working on products for the cicatrization of wombs that were bleeding too much during and after childbirth. And one substance, a derivative of ergotamine, became a discovery for him called LSD-25. And LSD-25, Albert Hoffman told me personally, had a spiritual molecule. And when the molecule, spirit, told him that this was necessary and important to change the consciousness of the time, he dove deeply, not only trying it out himself, but facilitating it worldwide. In the 50s, in the 60s, research was done everywhere, from Chile to Mexico, from Switzerland to the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia at that time, the United States, in Maryland. There's a great physician by the name of Stan Grof, he's in his late 80s now, who conducted thousands of journeys of LSD with patients. And suddenly, as I said before, it was made illegal and disappeared from the official market, thus appearing in the clandestine market, not with the level of purity that it was done in a lab, but giving it a reputation of risk and danger. And since it's very easy to scare people, risk and danger produces prohibition. If you think that cannabis, what is called marijuana, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, has been legal everywhere that has been the founding stone of civilizations, India, Mongolia, Nepal, and suddenly it became illegal. And thousands of human beings spend their lives in prison for the possession of 1 ounce of a substance that now, at the state level in the United States, is now totally legal. Not only legal medically, but recreationally. Why? Because it does not harm. On the contrary, it opens and relaxes and allows people to understand the functioning of their own mind and their own brain at a higher level. It's still not federally legal, but it is state-wise.
So it appears we are making some slow progress in a number of ways. Slowly, things are changing. And it's an exciting time that you are able to open your institute and help so many who are suffering right now. What else can you tell us about this new venture that you are on?
Many years ago, when I taught my seminars, and that was basically in South America, Nepal, and India, I said, have you learned anything in spending a weekend or a week studying with me? And the answer usually of good students is yes, of course. And I said, okay, we will see if you've learned anything. Let's see if you can contribute to those people that will never come and read a book, take a seminar, or listen to a videotape. Let's go into orphanages, nursing homes, prisons, and homeless centers and see if you can transmit a percentage of what you have learned. And the results were so incredible that I got honored with the Messenger of Peace Award from the United Nations back in 1987. Now, the interesting thing about that is that I called it a drop of honey, una gota de miel, because the wife of a dictator in South America sent me a letter saying, thank you for your grain of sand. And I said, this was no grain of sand, this was a drop of honey. And we coined it that way. But later, coming to the States, I called it the World Health Foundation for Development and Peace. And that foundation has done some social service over the past almost 38 years. It is under the auspices of that I'm starting the Warter Institute for Consciousness and Psychedelic Studies. Especially, as mentioned before, that now it is legal, it is possible, it is available. All one needs is a prescription, and it is easily purchasable in order to be given in an injection to a person that can benefit. And as a doctor, here, a full box of it, a full box of it that can help not hundreds, but close to 100 people. It is possible. We have it in our hands, and we can create a setting so that an individual can have an experience of what I call the exteriorization, which you described better than I've ever heard before, because you were outside of you. And from outside of yourself, you can say, I need not to be sad. I need not to be angry. I need not to suffer. I need not to grieve. I can celebrate the joy of living. And the joy of living is for free. We all are endowed with that inalienable right, which is not the pursuit of life, but the living of life. Not the fear of death, but the certainty of transcendence. And I can tell you, when somebody has that experience, suicide is out of the picture. War is out of the picture. The realization of a peaceful stance in front of oneself and others becomes more and more available. And why am I starting it, even though many people are starting it today? Because I believe not just in the medicalization of it. Even though I'm a medical doctor, I believe that the medicalization can remove the symptoms. But what we need is to activate the human promise. And the human promise is the most important part. What am I? What are you? What are we meant to experience in this time when we take physical form? And that is beyond disease. It is ease. It is health. It is wholeness. It is the hollows of life, not the fragments of life.
Absolutely amazing. Well, it looks like the timing of you getting access to this method of healing is really perfect at a time where there is so much upheaval, so much sadness, so much suffering in the world. How are other health practitioners coming together to bring this into the mainstream? Because that's normally where the blockage lies. What do you think needs to be done on that front?
Slowly, it is beginning to gain a reputation. There's a man I met many, many decades ago, Rick Doblin, who studied politics at the Harvard School of Government in order to allow some of the substances to go through the clinical trials of the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, in order for it to become allowed and legalized. There are many forces coming together now. The dark night of the soul between 1970 and today seems to be over. And more people are researching it in universities. There's more centers for the study of psychedelics today being created than any time in history before today. So I am very optimistic. I'm very optimistic. Of course, there are the merchants of fear and the merchants of terror, the classical psychological viewpoint that prefers, I like to call my psychiatry positive psychiatry, but many live off looking at the problems and are afraid of, because they might not have a job. They might not have to focus in what is incomplete in their own existence and trying to project it into others. Notwithstanding the fact that psychology with Carl Gustav Jung, and at its time with Freud and with William James, some of them having had experiences of the transcendent kind, and by the mediocrity, and I know people very closely that are so afraid that even though they have had experiences, they don't want to share it with their patients because their survival is at stake. And I tell you something, those people will not survive, because we are in a new time, we're in a new era. We are really in a new age.
This is exciting, Dr. Carlos. I can't wait to see the work that you will do and the number of lives you will transform with this new institute. How can people get access to you? What is the best way for them to get in touch?
My website, www.drwarter.com. And there is an information page there, and my staff will refer them to what is needed and wanted at that particular time.
Fantastic. Well, exciting times are ahead. Thank you so much for bringing this to the world and trying to help so many who suffer in silence. I'm looking forward to seeing the results that come out of this experience, the number of lives that will be changed. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you so much for your openness, your sincerity, your honesty, and your open heart.
Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The world of psychiatry is changing. You know, doctors are trying to find permanent solutions to the issues that we have. A lot of times people are given prescription drugs that just put a Band-Aid on the issues at hand. They don't address the root cause of depression, of addiction. And now we have a solution to get to the bottom of it and help. Tune in again next week when I interview Dr. Carlos on yet another fascinating subject. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Dr. Carlos, thank you again for this interview.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now, everybody.